If you're interested in the story behind the business headlines, check out Big Technology Podcast, my weekly show that features in-depth interviews with CEOs, researchers, and reformers in business and technology. Hi, I'm Alex Kantrowitz. I'm a longtime journalist, CNBC contributor, and the host of the show. I empty my Rolodex every Wednesday to bring you awesome episodes, so go check out Big Technology Podcast. It's available on all podcast apps. Would love to have you as a listener.
From LinkedIn News, I'm Jessie Hempel, host of the Hello Monday podcast. Start your week with the Hello Monday podcast. We'll navigate career pivots. We'll learn where happiness fits in. Listen to Hello Monday with me, Jessie Hempel, on the LinkedIn Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
I have some incredible news. My second book, How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race, is now the #1 new release in its category on Amazon. I'm so excited for this because we've put a lot of work into it, and this was risky because as a lawyer who's focusing on negotiation and conflict resolution, talking about race seems for many to be outside of the scope of what I usually do. But again, how are we defining negotiation? We define negotiation as any time you're having a conversation and somebody in the conversation wants something. And as the podcast is titled, Negotiate Anything, we can negotiate anything. And in my years of doing all of this work in the professional world, difficult conversations about race is something that comes up over and over and over again in the workplace. And there isn't really a solid resource out there that blends the fundamentals of negotiation and conflict resolution and effective communication with this particular topic. So it's risky. It is risky to venture in this way, but I'm really excited and encouraged by this early result. So this is not just a win for me. This is a win for you too, because you are part of this tribe. And so a quick note about the book. Who did I write this for? I wrote this for the person who is passionate about changing the world and their organizations for the better, the leader who leads a diverse team, and the professional who wants to learn how to overcome the hidden barriers that make it tough to connect with people with a different background. So whether you consider yourself an ally or just want to avoid making a critical mistake when discussing race, this book is for you. And for you as a podcast listener, I'm making a direct request. After 6 years and over 600 episodes of Negotiate Anything, I'm asking for your support in this endeavor to make the world a better place. Our goal of the American Negotiation Institute is to change the world, and this book plays a critical role in making that happen, and we would love to have your support. We have the links in the description of this episode so you can get your copy of How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Negotiate Anything. This show is produced by the American Negotiation Institute, and with over 5 million downloads and listeners in over 180 countries, listeners just like you have made this the #1 negotiation podcast in the world. Hi, my name is Kwame Christian, and I am the founder and CEO of the American Negotiation Institute. Here at ANI, we believe that the best things in life are on the other side of difficult conversations, and we are passionate about providing you with the best content that will help you to make your difficult conversations easier, both at work and at home. Lastly, I want to remind you that we offer consulting and conduct trainings, both virtually and in person, all around the world. Our focus is in 3 main areas. First, negotiation and conflict resolution. Second, leadership. And lastly, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Check the link in the description below to learn more about how we could work with you and your team. And now, without further ado, let's jump into the interview. Natalie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So how about you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Well, my name is Natalie Eicher. I am co-founder and co-CEO of Mettacool. I'm also a certified diversity executive, a certified coach, a speaker, and I think my most important role, I'm a mother to 2 wonderful children. Prior to Mettacool, which was co-founded about 5 years ago, I was in the technology industry. I was in sales for the majority of my career before Mettacool, and then towards the end of my work in the technology industry, I was starting to transition into diversity equity inclusion work. And it really gave birth to Mettacool. And I guess I'll do a little brief background on who Mettacool is as well. So Mettacool is a global consultancy that provides coaching and talent development programs. And we help organizations, typically those in male-dominated industries, really focus on better retaining, engaging, and advancing its gender diverse talent. So we have these more whole person focused programs that incorporate a really unique coaching methodology. It's been about 5 years now, and it's very, very fulfilling work. And we're really just so excited to work with the client partners that we get to work with that are so publicly committed to, gender equity and really making very systemic change within their organizations.
That is great. Well, kudos. Anytime a business makes it to 5 years, that's a big deal and a testament to their founders too. So kudos on that.
It's been a wild ride. It's been fun.
I can only imagine. That's great. Well, so with this episode, there's so many different ways that we could take this, right? And we could go for the how to advocate for yourself. I know that's a lot of the work that you all do. We could talk about why it's so important to have gender equity within these companies. Absolutely. But we're going to take a little bit of a different angle here, and we're going to talk about one of the interesting gaps that's in the industry that you have identified. And then we're going to talk about how we could use negotiation and conflict resolution skills to address those gaps. So when you think about the what's missing from what you've seen, how would you describe that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is there's a lot of, especially in our industry, right, in talent development and coaching, there's a lot of companies out there that are really focused on, programs and coaching to help women, advocate for themselves, to speak up, have a seat at the table, break the glass ceiling, right? You hear it all. And those are all wonderful things, right? I think, women crave, a different type of development that really acknowledges the different barriers that they face, especially within male-dominated industries. But this whole, just fix women approach is really not the answer, right? Just providing them with, hey, how can you fight imposter syndrome? How can you be, more assertive? How can you self-promote? That's not the only answer. And I think one of the things I want to talk about today is just the need for this more holistic approach in order for us to truly, reach and approach gender parity, right? For us to see organizations that are more gender balanced. And so, what we're on a mission to do is how do we incorporate into programs and the work we're doing with clients, this holistic picture that still, of course, in our programs has, these elements of how do you have the conversations about self-advocacy and of course, sharpen those skills, but how do you involve management and leadership in the conversations of, really fighting gender bias when it comes to retaining and engaging and advancing gender diverse talent? And then how do you, as a company, right, have the right processes, procedures in place, the right tools that leadership and employees can really leverage to try to take that bias out of the equation, or even acknowledge that it exists, and to again put the right parameters and processes in place so that women can truly be successful within the organization. So that more holistic picture to me is what is what's going to move the needle on gender equity.
I love this. This is really great. And now for you have been in this space for a really long time and you have a lot of experience here. So I want to go deeper into one of the things that you said, because I don't want people to overlook this, because the fixed women approach is really, it's a really interesting topic to explore. So let's dig into that, because again, a lot of people focus on that as the solution. And you're saying, no, we need to have a more holistic approach. So let's address the fixed women approach with a little bit more depth.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that just, irks me. It's been around for a while where, companies are like, we really need to see more women in leadership. And so we're going to throw a bunch of money at, helping women, again, fight that imposter syndrome, be more confident, give them opportunities at mentorship. And again, some of those things are great and I think are a sliver of what's important. But what we're doing when we're just kind of isolating women and saying, here are the things you need to do differently. You need to, speak up in meetings. You need to, be more assertive. You need to, walk that fine line between being very, assertive and being nice, right? There's a lot of the messaging in the fixed women approach that really, I think, feeds into this bias that exists called the double bind, where it's essentially, walking that tightrope between these stereotypes that exist for women, where in order to be seen, for example, as leaders, they need to be assertive and, make decisions, but also be nice and collaborative. And, it's exhausting for women, right? So what happens when you see programs that only do that is you kind of have these programs that exist in a vacuum. What happens is you get women together that go through programs, that go through these trainings, they work with coaches, and they emerge from these programs with, say, more confidence, with learning how to advocate for themselves, how to negotiate. But then it's impossible for them to be truly successful a lot of times within these organizations because the rest of the ecosystem was not engaged. The managers that they report into have no idea what type of barriers they're facing. They're not bringing to light, the bias that prevents them from being promoted after they've even been through a program like this. And then, you look at the company as a whole, right? And with them not having, if the company doesn't have the right procedures in place or even the policies for how do people get promoted? And, how do we address, having objective promotion criteria and hiring criteria and all of these things. So the fix-it approach at the end of the day is just, unfortunately not the long-term solution, and will still ensure that we are behind when it comes to gender equity if we're not engaging the entire ecosystem within a company.
Does your company invest in professional development training? If you believe that your team would benefit from a negotiation workshop, all you need to do is go to our website, fill out the workshop request form, and then we'll set up a time to chat. These workshops are completely customizable, and we've done them all around the country. Negotiation and conflict resolution skills are beneficial across all professions, but they're especially useful in procurement, purchasing, sales, sourcing, and contract management. Our calendar is filling up quickly, and we even have some workshops scheduled for next year. If you think you might want one, I'd suggest reaching out soon so you don't miss out. Check out the link in the description to learn more, and we will be right back after this.
Hey you, I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/marketer. Terms and conditions apply.
Well said. And, I was, again, my base is negotiation. And I like to read a lot. And for when it comes to some of these books on the topic of gender dynamics and negotiation, I'm realizing that a lot of it was written from a male perspective, still a male dominated perspective. And I think one of the best ways of encapsulating the challenge with that perspective is this. And it was a LinkedIn comment that I got on one of my posts and was eye-opening. And the woman said, blaming women's negotiation skills for gender inequity is the ultimate form of gaslighting.
Yes. And that's so beautifully said.
And I said, wow, you're absolutely right. Because yes, it's great to have these tools and everything like this, but it's so important for us to realize that, hey, we have some serious systemic problems within our companies and we need to address this.
No, I love that comment for so many reasons, but it is he or she, right? So right with that. And there's so much research on this, especially that comes out around, talking about gender pay gaps. And I think there's a big following of people who believe that women are not as ambitious as men, that they're less assertive and that they're just less likely to ask for things in the first place, specifically when it comes to negotiation. But there's all of this research coming out that, really demonstrates that the reason why you see gender pay gaps and all of these other things where women are not successful in negotiations, if at all, is that because they face backlash due to gender stereotypes, right? Where, whether people believe that they have these biases or not, some people think that it's, not appropriate for women to, act aggressively and ask for that raise or to negotiate certain things. So, that's what is actually coming out and continues to come out in the research, is that it's not that women don't want raises or to negotiate. It's that there's this ingrained fear of backlash that happens because of these biases that exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that gives us an opportunity to transition a bit to how we can be better advocates, how we can be better allies, and how we can actually create real change. And you mentioned it before, it comes down to creating change at the systemic level within these organizations. So now, considering what we just talked about, and recognizing that we need to focus our efforts when it comes to change management towards the systems more so than the individuals, what are some of those systems, policies, or cultural changes that need to happen within organizations in general?
I really think, and I'm also trying to think about from the lens of anyone, what can they do to impact this change within their company? So I think, as an example, one of these things is, wage transparency, right? Things like wage transparency or having really clear processes related to negotiations, promotions, salaries, things like that. Because what happens is when an individual isn't really clear on what's up for negotiation or what is the criteria that decisions are being based on, that ambiguity is really detrimental, right? And so if I'm an individual trying to affect change within my organization, when it comes to some of those areas where, negotiation tends to really be front and center, like when people are being hired into a company, when they're getting promoted, things like that, is to ask, what am I being measured against? What are the clear, objective criteria, so that I can come to the table and negotiate against those things, how I'm able to showcase my performance against these things. So, there's a lot of times when our coaches are working with clients and they're talking about preparing for that promotion, where it's if you aren't getting direction on what what is needed to be promoted to the next level, or what you need to get a salary increase. Ask your organization, for clarity, or if it doesn't exist, ask the tough questions on why, right? To know that within an organization, there isn't really crystal clear, rules on what does it take to be successful? What does it take to get promoted? So everything from, making sure that there are clear processes around promotions and salary increases. But then another thing, if you're within an organization as a hiring manager, within, talent acquisition, any of those spaces, and you're talking about attracting diverse talent, a big pitfall is asking them, what did you make in your previous role? Right, which is very, very common. But because women and historically underrepresented talent are oftentimes so underpaid, we're perpetuating that issue by basing their salary at your company based on what they made before. So I think there's a lot, depending on your role, that you can do to question these processes that really need to be questioned and implemented within an organization to make sure that women and underrepresented talent are truly able to be successful and able to negotiate against, things that help remove some of the biases that exist just naturally.
This is great. So much to explore here, right? And so let's start with what you just said at the end. We have to find legitimate, objective criteria in order to combat the biases that exist naturally. And that's so important for us to realize that these biases are natural. They don't make us bad. They make us human. We all have biases, right? And so we have to address the biases so we can make sure that they're not having an inappropriate impact on the decisions that we're making and a negative impact on people. And in this conversation, we're talking about women in the workplace. Yeah. And now, one of the things that you mentioned that was really great is the importance of starting with curiosity, because we're talking about the need to understand or create legitimate objective criteria for these decisions that we're making, so biases don't creep in. But we need to see what the criteria is right now in order to determine where the criteria needs to be. That's part of negotiation too. This negotiation ultimately is an information game. The more information you have, the better off you are. So the first step in being an advocate or an ally in this situation is talking to the people who have the power, the people who are making the decisions, and inquire how those decisions are being made. And then we can get that information, take it back to our little lab, right? And think through it, see, okay, what works, what doesn't work, those type of things. And now we can come with a proposal for change. And that's where the negotiation begins. And I think this is really, really interesting too. And again, a simple example you gave is just removing the question, what did you make in your previous role, from the hiring process. That is a procedural structure that is in place that once removed eliminates a lot of bias, because it's not just the fact that it will, like talking about the previous wage, will have an impact on the employer with what they deem appropriate to offer. Just understanding the psychology of anchoring in negotiation. We have an episode on that. That's one of my favorite things to teach on. It's going to have an impact on you in your own negotiation as well. Just your mindset. You're going to be focused on what you made before, not what you currently should be making. And it's going to mean that you're going to be less aggressive in the negotiation when you have a lot more room to negotiate for more. So there was a lot of depth to what you said. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I even, think about, when it comes to, asking these questions about, how is it that I'm being evaluated? So everything from a performance review to, again, actually getting promoted. What does it take to reach the next levels? All the time in our programs, we're helping a lot of women create their, a very tangible career development plan, and something very tangible that that really brings to light their accomplishments, who they are, what makes them unique, where they want to go in their career, what they're doing to get there. And then, we're always coaching, them to map those things that they're putting in here to what they're going for. So let's say they want to take on a new role within the organization. It's a people leadership role. So how can you, highlight your accomplishments in such a way that, and your value that maps to what are the expectations of a people leader within your organization. And if you can't get a straight answer from your organization, from your manager on what does it mean at this company to be in that position, to take on a leadership role, you're negotiating in the dark. You're presenting your value in a way that you don't know is going to be in line with what they're looking for, so that you can see the trickle down effect of not having that clarity, not having those objective measurements for what it takes to get a salary increase, get promoted, really succeed within the organization. So a lot of times, the individual women will coach them to say, if you do not have that clarity, go and seek that clarity, ask the tough questions, question the process, the whole processes of how performance reviews are. If you're getting feedback from your manager, or from peers, right? Because so much of the feedback we receive on a daily basis are from our peers as well. If you're getting feedback that doesn't have specifics, that about noticeable behaviors, or if there's not feedback that can be mapped back to expectations of you and your role, you should go seek that additional clarity. You should go ask them for them to have another conversation with you about it. Or if you see that there is, if you can very clearly see that there is bias in the feedback that they're delivering, how do you bring that to their attention and call it in, as we like to talk about, so that that manager, that person can do better, can bring that into their awareness that, the feedback or the conversations that they've had with you, do have the bias that, again, we're all human, to your point earlier, and that we all have these biases.
Yeah. And you said something in passing that I want to dig in on, because this is really important. When you said calling in versus calling out, can you explain that discrepancy?
Yes. This is something that I'm really passionate about. I think people get really nervous about so-called calling people out when they witness discrimination, bias, because people can, really become defensive. It's a lot of times a natural reaction. Well, I didn't mean that. That wasn't my intention. And so one of the things we talk about with women in our programs is, you are going to face, bias a little bit differently than others, that are, the majority within your organization. But what do you do? How do you call in versus calling out? And so calling in is essentially a way of, coming back to the person after you've witnessed some type of bias and saying to them, hey, I know this probably wasn't your intention, but I wanted you to know when you said this is how you made me feel, or even just these open-ended, curious questions like, what did you mean when you said that? Or did you consider how that may have made so-and-so feel? Let's say you're an observer to, bias. And the calling in is essentially getting curious and asking questions about, that person's, what they were thinking, why they did it. And it kind of brings the defenses down and allows you to have a conversation. It allows them to really internalize what they said, think about it, again, bring into their awareness where there might be these biases, versus calling out, which is still a strategy to be used. We talk a lot about, you should call someone out if there is immediate harm that's being done, or if you feel like you need to interrupt and redirect to prevent further harm. So if someone says something that's riddled with bias in front of a meeting, a group of people, where you feel that if you don't, interrupt in that moment and call them out, that there would be tremendous damage, right? So calling in is a more, I would say, curious, thoughtful approach to still addressing it, but making sure that we are, as much as possible, disarming that natural defensiveness that happens. And it's interesting. We did a lot of trainings with clients back in March around International Women's Day, where we talked a lot about, calling in when we witnessed gender bias. And we took a lot of polls with I think it was like 12 different organizations that we did this with. And the majority of people in every single company that we worked with said that when they witness gender bias, either when they're on the receiving end of it or they witness it, that they ignore it, that they don't take action to either call in or call out that person. And I think that was really, really eye-opening to know that, the majority of people don't feel confident or equipped in how to address when gender bias is happening, because it happens all the time.
Yeah, there's so much to explore here with what you said, Natalie. So, but I want to just be respectful of time, but I want to circle back to some of these things. Again, really, really profound and insightful things that you said. You said lower defenses. You talked about being disarming, and you talked about avoiding defensiveness, right? And I really want to focus in on those concepts, because when we are having these difficult conversations, it's not just about making sure we're communicating effectively and persuasively. It's also about making sure we're navigating the conversation in a way where we're mindful of avoiding unnecessary resistance to the conversation. Because sometimes if we are overly aggressive, we call people out, we use shame-based strategies for having these conversations, people get defensive. And when you think about the root word of defensive, we're talking about defense. They're protecting something. What are they protecting? They're protecting their ego. They're protecting their sense of self, their perception of themselves as a good person. And they feel like they need to put their guard up. But if you approach it in a way where it's more collaborative, calling them in, showing them that you care about them and the situation and making things better, it makes it more likely for them to accept what it is that you're saying. So you can have two different approaches, right? You can have the more aggressive approach where you're very direct and you might be correct. But we also have to remember there's a difference between being right and being persuasive. And approaching the conversation in a way that lowers defensiveness is a much more persuasive way to do it.
Absolutely. And I think just to add on to that, when you think about, because we're talking a lot about, gender bias and just biases in general, right? When you do call someone out, and it might come from a place of being a really very emotional response instead of getting curious and asking, what did you mean by that? Or, stating, or approaching it with like anger, that further perpetuates bias. For example, like there's a lot of research out there, when it comes to even when you think about like intersectionality within women, right? Women of color, when they tend to be like really, really call people or things out right there. A lot of women of color say, I get stereotyped then as the angry Black woman, right? Because I'm, going off on someone about the inexcusable behavior. But again, it can really further perpetuate these stereotypes. So, and I had someone maybe 6 months ago call me in about a perceived microaggression. And it was like the way she did it was just beautiful. It really helped to truly disarm, helped me get off my, not be defensive and truly think about and have a conversation about the microaggression. And it's just it's important, I think, work and education around, how we can have these really tough conversations about something that ultimately, if people are more aware of these biases, this sets, especially underrepresented, talent to be more successful in having, successful negotiations, tough conversations.
Yes, well said. And there is so much more to explore here, but just for the sake of time, we'll wrap this up. And I know people are saying, please, Kwame, don't, I want more. Well, there is a way to get more. So Natalie, before you go, can you let them know about Mettacool, how to get in touch with you, and about the work you do?
Yes, absolutely. So, you can hear more about Mettacool on our website, www.mettacool.com. You can send us an email, hello@mettacool.com. And I would say the thing that we would love to hear from people about are, again, those companies that are wanting to, look further into, what their organizations can do to better retain and advance their, gender diverse and historically underrepresented talent. Even, those, women listening that, would be curious about bringing Mettacool into their organizations and really seeing that change.
This is great, Natalie. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations! You've just joined an elite club. By listening to a full episode, you're now officially on the Negotiate Anything team. So welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episodes of the show. The best things in life lie on the other side of difficult conversations. Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep getting better. Your relationships will improve, your career will soar, and you'll have the confidence you need to get the most out of these crucial conversations. Again, thank you for joining the team. We're excited to have you, and I will see you in the next episode. I'll catch you later.